I have left Elm Street in downtown Greensboro, but I wanted to have a picture of Woolworths behind me while I talk. Um, I'm not going to be able to do justice to the most incredible thing that ever happened in Greensboro's history in this short YouTube video, but I'm going to give a condensed version of what happened and hope that you all will dig deeper, that you'll go do a little research, that you'll go um, look up the many YouTube videos that there are, especially the ones produced by the Smithsonian Museum, are just very well done and can give you much more information about what I'm going to tell you about the sit-in movement of 1960 and how it all began right here in Greensboro. So taking you back to the time leading up to February 1st, 1960, it's hard to even fathom what was going on in public accommodations, but the whole Jim Crow era had not ended at that point. And there was a restlessness throughout the country, but it was a pretty quiet time too. There was no protest or activity on campuses, or some of the civil rights movement activity that you think of was, a lot of it was coming later. And actually, what happened in Greensboro helped lead to what did happen later in the 60s. So the Greensboro students who went to NCA&T were meeting throughout the fall of 1959 and kind of talking about different strategies of what they could do. And they wanted to challenge the inability of Black citizens to be able to have truly equal access to things like, movie theaters and buses and trains, retail stores. All the things that we take for granted now were not available on a truly equal basis to everyone. And so the students at A&T and at other colleges in Greensboro were meeting and developing a strategy of what to do when they decided to act. And they actually had developed a very good strategy, which you'll find later was exactly what they implemented and led to the success of the sit-in movement. But one of the students, James O'Neill, was traveling back from Christmas vacation in New York with his family and was on a Greyhound bus that stopped in Richmond, Virginia, and he was not served at the white lunch counter there. And it triggered something in him, and it was something that had happened to him many, many times before, but he finally was just so fed up and angry with having to accept that as the status quo, that when he got back to Greensboro, got off the bus and went back to his dorm room, he gathered some of his friends and said that, it was time to actually do something. So together with 3 of his good friends, he put together the strategy that they had talked about all fall and got ready to go down to the Woolworths the next day to wear their nicest clothes, to walk inside the store, which was legal and which was accepted, and to purchase items like hairbrush, toothbrush, toothpaste, and keep the receipts, and then go and sit down at the whites only lunch counter and ask to be served. Now, they didn't know if that was going to cause bloodshed and violence, or if that was going to cause, nothing, but they were pretty sure it wouldn't cause nothing as a response. They were pretty sure they would be met with a lot of pushback from the people that were behind the counter at Woolworths, and also from the management, who they assumed would call the police and so forth. So it was kind of a mystery what they were going to confront the next day, but they were at the point where they were willing to risk everything. They were willing to risk their college educations, their safety. Really, they were willing to risk their lives to challenge Jim Crow. One other important strategic item that they had on their list of things to do was that they were going to stop on East Market Street at the clothing store of Ralph Johns, who was a white ally of theirs who had been working with them through the fall, and they were going to let him know what was going on so that he could call the press, and he was going to call Greensboro News and Record and tell them that they needed to be there. So they did. They alerted Ralph Johns. They got up the next day. They prepared themselves. They walked from the A&T campus to downtown Greensboro, which is not a short walk. Walked in, purchased items, got their receipts, sat down at the lunch counter, and were told that they could not be served, that they better move on because they were going to stir up trouble, and they needed to leave the store immediately. Well, they didn't leave the store. They stayed there. They were approached by not only the servers, but the manager of the store, and then he called the police. The police, interestingly, couldn't figure out what to do. The young men had not done anything wrong. They couldn't figure out how to arrest them. And so this went on until the manager decided to close the store early. Okay, we're still February 1st. Store closed early. They went back to the A&T campus and met with some friends and decided that yes, they were going to come back. They were going to do it again. They were going to have some backup this time. A few additional people came with them. And so on February 2nd, they went back and did the same thing. And this time, an additional factor was that the press was there. So there were lots of pictures taken that day. And there were some articles being written and circulated throughout the South about this. And it was, instead of, causing tremendous pushback in those early days, what it did was alerted students on other campuses who wanted to do the same thing and had just been kind of waiting for the right moment. They all became energized, and so protests and sit-ins began to spread throughout North Carolina to other cities, and also to cities throughout the South like Atlanta, Nashville, Charlotte. And so pretty soon, the whole country knew what was going on in Greensboro and beyond, and things were starting to get very interesting. There was no immediate bloodshed or violence. Everyone had been very well trained on how to apply the standards of peaceful resistance, and it was done very professionally, so that the violence came through words. So lots of terrible words were aimed at the students. that were protesting, and some of them in other cities were arrested. And, but they continued their vigils at the lunch counters, and they're picketing outside the retail establishments that they were targeting. This went on in Greensboro through the rest of the school year at A&T. And interestingly, in the summer, when a lot of the students had to go home, students from Dudley High School came and supplemented and sat at the lunch counter in the place of some of the college students who had to go home. So it's a big source of pride at Dudley High School now in Greensboro that they did this. Anyway, finally, July 25th, through lots of behind the scenes negotiating and meetings and discussions and talks, finally, the first meals were served to Black citizens on July 25th, 1960, at the Woolworths in Greensboro.